Hey guys, so I want to go over a few things with you when you're doing your Common Lit. I want to go over the answers and just kind of give you some insight into how to find the correct answers. So, your Common Lit for this week was Charles. So, you want to make sure, guys, that you read it. Okay. You also have the read aloud button. So, if you don't want to read it, let it play it for you and you listen. Okay. So, you read Charles, okay, all the way to the bottom. Remember that you have the footnotes. What are footnotes for? They're to help you, give you a little bit of extra information, maybe words or information that you really didn't know or you aren't familiar with. Then you go back and you're going to answer the guided reading questions. Notice it has Q1. It'll bring you, all right, here's Q1, okay? And you're going to answer the guided reading. You have to do the guided reading questions first. Then it will allow you to do the assessment questions. Okay? So let's go through. We're going to go through the assessment questions. So it says, which sentences just first, sorry, timeout. It's a part A, part B question. So first you have to answer part A. All right? Which sentences describe the main theme of the short story? So, what could be the main theme or the lesson learned in Charles? Well, we know that Charles is actually made up, right? He is actually Lori. So, what could be a theme? Well, you need to go through your answers, okay? And we say, children sometimes act out when they're attempting to figure out who they are. Well, that sounds like a good answer, but we don't want to assume. Number two, letter B is parents often don't give their kids enough attention, and this causes them to act out. Well, that's probably not why the author wrote that story, right? So we're going to rule out B. C, naughty children are more likely to become misbehaving adults when they grow up. Is that really going to be a lesson or a theme that they're trying to give us? Probably not. And then lastly, you have D. Children are strongly influenced by the bad behavior of their peers. Well, that could be an answer. But what would be the best answer? A. So A would actually be, and I can't highlight here, I don't think, but A would be your best answer. Okay? But now we say, well, children can sometimes act out, right? So let's go back really quick. Can act out when they're attempting to figure out who they are. Well, part B, we then have to find a piece of evidence to support that. So we have 4 answer choices. So after you review your answer choices, my sweet voiced nursery school tot replaced by a long trousered swaggering character who forgot to stop at the corner and wave goodbye to me. Well, that's not really acting out. So we could probably rule out A. Look at letter B. Do you think kindergarten is too unsettling for Lori? All of this toughness and bad grammar, and this Charles boy sounds like such a bad influence. That might could be right. Okay. With the third week of kindergarten, Charles was an institution in our family. The baby was being a Charles when she cried all afternoon. Well, that doesn't really have to do with kids acting out. Babies crying, that's not acting out. So let's look at D. We had a little trouble adjusting the first week or so, she said primly, but now he's fine, a little helper, with occasional lapses, of course. Well, adjusting, okay, a few lapses. So that could be acting out. So your best answer is going to be letter D. D as in dog. Number 3, another part A, part B. How does the narrator's discussion of Lori contribute to the plot of the story? Well, how does it contribute to the whole main thing about the story? Okay. And the narrator's discussion of Lori. A, the narrator shows how Lori is being a good the narrator shows how Lori is a good kid deep down, suggesting that Charles might be similarly good. That's probably not right. The narrator describes how easily influenced Lori is, suggesting that he's not confident in his identity yet. Well, does that really sound like it? No. The narrator shows how naturally curious Laurie is, bringing attention to why he might experiment with good and bad behaviors. Okay. Well, that might be one, right? Or D, the narrator describes how Laurie often misbehaves at home, highlighting the similarities between him and Charles. Well, if we think about the whole story, right? Who is Charles? And it was Laurie. So your best answer is going to be D, because Laurie is making that parallel or that connection to Charles. Similarly, how you're going to do that in your narrative at the end of the Unit 1. So we know the narrator's discussion of Laurie contributes to the whole story by the narrator describing how Laurie often misbehaves at home, highlighting the similarities between him and Charles. Part B, which quote from the story would best support the answer to part A? Well, if you forget, go back. Okay, so we know that the narrator is describing how Laurie often misbehaves at home. The day my son started kindergarten, he renounced corduroy overalls with bibs and began wearing blue jeans and a belt. That's not really misbehaving at home, right? At lunch, he spoke insolently to his father, spilled his baby sister's milk, and remarked that his teacher said we were not to take the name of the Lord in vain. Well, that would definitely be misbehaving. All this toughness and bad grammar in this Charles boy sounds like such a bad influence. Maybe. Or D, Laurie reported grimly at lunch on Thursday, the third week. Charles was so good today that the teacher gave him an apple. Well, is he being bad and acting out? So what's the best answer? You look at B. He's telling his family what happened, right? So he's kind of making that comparison, that parallel to himself. And your last question, 5, how does Charles' behavior vary throughout the story? Well, Laurie describes Charles' behavior as improving but occasional setbacks. Laurie describes Charles' behavior as steadily improving throughout the story. Laurie emphasizes how Charles is always misbehaving, even if he's not caught. Or D, Laurie shows how Charles wants to change at the end of the story, but he doesn't know how. Well, we know that Laurie describes Charles' behavior as improving, but having occasional setbacks, right? Because he still gets in a little bit of trouble here and there, but for the most part, he has improved. So number 5 would be A. All right, and you do have one more question. This is a written response. First thing that we should do when we're doing a written response or a constructed response, you need to race. You should always restate the question, answer it, cite evidence, and then you want to explain it. So, why is the ending of the story ironic or the opposite of what you would expect? The ending of the story, Charles, would be ironic because the reader would have never thought that Laurie was actually Charles and that Charles was just made up. This can be seen at the end of the story when Laurie's mother discovers that there is no Charles in kindergarten. This shows us that Charles is actually fake. That would be a great answer. It answers the question, it restated it, answered it, cited evidence, and explained. So I hope that helps you out.